Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sharlayan Forum.
Elephant in the room, I got a haircut.
My name is Chris, and today we are here with a special guest, 99 Vit. How are you doing, sir?
Hello, I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. So we're doing a little bit of a video today to talk about job design in Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail. But before we get started, Vit, if you want to just introduce yourself and tell the people what they need to know about you.
Yeah, not a whole lot. I'm Vit. I have been making YouTube videos in the 14 space for a few months now and been streaming on Twitch, do some high-end raiding. I've done Savage, Ultimate, cleared week 1 in Party Finder by myself this tier, and I've done all the
Wild
ultimates except for UCOB at this point, so I don't know. I consider myself fairly casual still, while still being, somewhat decent at the game, but, not taking it as seriously as some people maybe.
Sure.
But, still trying to be knowledgeable about things and playing it a lot. So playing a bunch of different jobs and
I saw that you recently got 100 on everything. I saw that on your Twitch stream.
Correct.
So,
yeah, I finally
congrats
hit
on that.
100 on all jobs this week, so that's, I guess,
huge.
exciting.
You beat me to it.
Yeah.
So I remember we had this conversation before, but 14 is your first MMO, right? You had never played an MMO before 14.
Correct. Yeah, I still have not.
So this is the only one you've ever played.
Yeah. I can't think of any others off the top of my head.
Okay.
I might have played RuneScape like in middle school a couple of days.
Sure,
that's
yeah. Everybody played a little RuneScape.
Yeah, right.
But that's interesting to me because I have like the exact opposite background, right? So I've played so many MMOs. Like I played Ultima Online back in the day. I played a lot of Final Fantasy XI, World of Warcraft, Guild Wars.
Yep.
Everything.
Pretty much all the big
Terra
ones, sure.
even. Yeah. Just some really wacky stuff. So talking about job design is really interesting for me because I've seen so many different iterations of so many different ideas and so many different jobs. And it's interesting because you see the good and the bad of Final Fantasy system, right? And that's kind of where I wanted to start, is what you think like the pros and cons of Final Fantasy XIV's job design are right now.
Sure, yeah, and it's funny because I'm absolutely looking at it in a bubble, right? Like I don't have that background from all those other games, so
right.
I'm purely coming at this as like, is this game fun? I have nothing to compare it to, and it's grabbed me. I've been playing this since the end of Shadowbringers. I started.
Okay.
So just basically going through MSQ in like the tail end of Shadowbringers after all the patches had come out. Got caught up at the start of Endwalker and, got into it pretty seriously there. So yeah, I'm still like newer. I don't even have the FF14 like background to reference from past expansions. So it's strictly like an Endwalker and onwards perspective for me.
Yeah, because Shadowbringers was when, for people who played in ARR, Shadowbringers was really when like modern Final Fantasy XIV as we know it now, like kind of started in Shadowbringers. Like things were very different in Stormblood and Heavensward.
Yeah,
so
sure.
like even that feels almost like a separate game in its own way.
Yeah, from what I've heard,
it's definitely interesting to have a perspective that's sort of segregated off of that. It's just a fascinating thing to talk to somebody who hasn't played for quote unquote that long.
Yeah, you won't get any like back in my day quotes from me.
Right. Back when the game was good, right?
Back in my day, it's level 90, I guess.
Right. So yeah, what do you think is the good things about the system as it is right now?
Okay, yeah. So what I actually just love about this game is honestly the combat and like just the flow of it. To me, it comes across like, compared to other, RPGs, action games, whatever you want to compare it to. Obviously, an MMO combat with this style is very much its own thing, but it plays more almost like a rhythm game to me, which is something like I grew up on and have always loved. Just trying to like executionally do your rotation, the flow of that, like there's really not too much improv that goes on in many of the jobs,
right?
Which a lot of people tend to complain about, things being, too simplified, straightforward, whatever it may be. That's kind of something I do enjoy personally, just like trying to get that execution down at a basic level. At, you know, high-end optimization side of things, it gets maybe a little stale after you've done it 100 times in a row.
Sure.
But I don't know, swapping between all the different jobs, that's one thing that really appeals to me personally. I do think there's a lot of really unique identity to a lot of the jobs as well, which is fun for sure. That's like the highlight of this game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, I remember when I first played Final Fantasy XI, because, you know, before that I had only really played a little bit of like Ultima Online, and then like I played a little bit of WoW, and then I started playing Final Fantasy XI a little bit later into the life cycle. The game, I think it originally released in 2002, which is insane to think about. The game's 22 years old. But I think I started playing probably in like 2004, 2005, which would have been right after WoW came out. And I remember my favorite thing to do in WoW was to like start a character and I'd level it to like level 3, and then I'd start a different character on a different class, and I just loved experimenting with different stuff.
Yeah.
And playing 11, where you could just switch jobs to whatever you wanted, was just like blew my mind to a million pieces when I was a kid. And to see 14 keep doing that is really awesome. And, you know, to your point, I think that the jobs are in a place where they're relatively simple, but not in like a boring way, with a couple of exceptions.
Yeah.
But they're all really easy to like understand at a fundamental level, right? Like you can pick them all up and play them well enough to get by, like basically across the board, if you are functioning, you know?
Yeah, if you just know how things are supposed to work with like putting damage into buffs and, you know,
right,
that sort of thing. And
the overarching philosophy of the design like is applicable to all the jobs, and so they're all like super viable.
Yep. Yeah, if you know how to play one, you can pretty easily just pick up another. You have to read some tooltips, but it's pretty straightforward.
And the balance also, I think, is incredible in Final Fantasy. I think it's probably one of the most balanced MMOs in the market.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you keep up with WoW stuff at all, probably not, but that game just had a new expansion come out, and you know, it's the same thing where some classes are just worse than others, and you can't get into groups to do stuff because they're just bad.
Yeah, you know? I have not seen the recent stuff, but I've heard plenty of that in the past from people playing WoW.
Yeah, so you know, it hasn't been that way in 14 since Heavensward. That did happen in Heavensward.
Yeah.
And that's like, I always make fun of the game in a way where I'm like, you remember when the game was good and you weren't allowed to play Paladin because it was just terrible because it couldn't block magic? And people are like, that was so unique. And I'm like, no, dude, it sucked. But
yeah, if you run into anybody in this game locking out jobs currently, at least in Savage, like, I don't know, people probably just clown on you if you're doing that, but
yeah, because it's a weird thing to do, right? Like, there's no reason to do it. Like, every job is perfectly capable.
Sure. Yeah,
as long as the person's playing.
Once you get into like current ultimates on launch, that's a different story for sure. If the balance doesn't improve slightly, like, it's really, like you're saying, it's not bad. It's fine for Savage with the current DPS checks, but like thinking back to top on release, it's like we had a Reaper and a Dragoon, me and my co-melee in our party, and like that alone was enough to really impede our progress on phase 1 of that fight, because it's such a short phase and both of those jobs didn't have like the strongest openers, so it just made it harder than it needed to be, even though they were both
when Dragoon still had to ramp.
Yeah, exactly.
It didn't have life.
Yeah, and Reaper didn't have like double and shroud off the bat either. Like, they still don't, obviously, but it's like that alone, even though those jobs were well balanced in Savage, was enough to like throw it off in Ultimate. Like, it was still doable, but it just like wasn't worth the hassle. Like, I just swapped a ninja and it was no problem.
Right.
But
well, I guess that sort of leads us into the next section, which is cons, right? So the things that aren't great. So, you know, if you want to talk about that.
Oh man, I don't know. Like there are obvious cons of things getting stale. A lot of people complain about homogenization, right, between different jobs. Like, I don't know. Do you have anything to start on with this? Because just off the top of my head, like,
I think that one of the things that I kind of catch myself thinking a lot when I try to think of something bad about job design right now is that there's not very much room for a lot of the jobs to grow.
Sure.
Like I think that like Reaper is a really good example of a job where like I have no idea what they're going to keep doing to that job to like keep adding stuff other than to just like now you have a finisher on a finisher on a finisher.
It's
you
getting
know,
the
and it's
red
like,
mage treatment.
yeah, but it's like, what do? You
Follow
know,
up
like
to
they put an
Perfectio.
OGCD. Yeah,
Yeah, you get an
exactly. You have
OGCD after Communio.
yeah, so you get Perfecti or you know, and then
Yeah, it's
Perfectiist or something. It's just I feel like we're kind of reaching this zenith with a lot of the job designs where I'm slightly worried going into 8.0 about like how in the world can they possibly add to this without having to rip down like half the stuff that's in it, you know?
Yeah, so I feel like we're going to go on 8 different tangents here, but there's also the side of things where we're at level 100. Like, people have speculated, do we go to 110 or do they do a level reset? And maybe revamp the combat in general, like the job design overall. Like, if they do like a level reset, what happens then? Like, are things going to fundamentally play differently, or do they just do like a level squish, right? That is, I guess, kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Well, let's expand on that actually, because that was something I had written down in my notes.
Yeah.
So, you know, while we're here, do you think that we should go to level 110, or do you think we should do a level squish, or should we do like a horizontal progression thing? What do you think the right call is?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't have that MMO experience to see like how that felt back in WoW, because I know they had level squishes and everything, right? So I don't really know, but for me personally, I feel like something more horizontal would be best. I don't know if that's like any type of like job mastery system or something along those lines where, you know, you stay level 100 but get some other type of upgrade along the way, maybe.
Right.
I really don't know what to do. I don't think going to 110 feels that impactful.
Yeah. And I think that the history, sorry to cut you off. I think that like the history of Final Fantasy sort of like tells you that like 100 is the limit, right? like all the previous ones, or at least most of the previous ones, have kind of stopped at like 99 or 100 or something like that. So I think if we went to 110, it would feel weird. Like something in my brain just tells me that that's wrong with a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, for me, like 100 feels satisfying. I don't think that's a different side of the coin, though. It's I don't know how satisfying it felt this expansion to hit 100 on all of the jobs, or any of the jobs, really. It was just like another stepping stone, I guess, where, you know, a lot of this goes back into just current job design, but I don't know if any of the jobs level 100 kits or abilities from 90 to 100 were super impactful, in my opinion, where it like really felt like, okay, we're at level cap now. It's like we really feel it. It's very much just an extension. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the only one that I really felt that with was Viper, because at 100 you get all of the reawakened OGCDs.
Yeah.
Which like fundamentally changes how that game plays. Like you just hit like 3 times as many buttons all of a sudden. Which like that's really cool. You know, that's like a really cool feeling to like hit 100 and you're like, yes, now I have this thing. But
yeah, some of the jobs do better than others for sure.
Yeah, but you know, like Samurai, I think is a good example of like, I don't think I really loved anything that happened from 90 to 100. I mean, I don't hate any of it. I don't dislike any of it.
But it all just feels like 90 Samurai.
Yeah, it all kind of just feels the same.
Yeah, same with many of the melee.
Yeah. I
Monk
think
got some really cool stuff with a lot of its ranged attacks.
Yeah, you know, I really like the riddles and the replies.
Yep.
I think that that's a really, really cool system. But again, Monk is one of those jobs where I'm like, now what? You know, like do we
where do they go from here?
Riddle of Water and another OGCD, and we get another, like the other combo now gets all of its upgrades. Like what do we do from here? You know?
Yeah. I don't know. We're going to get into like weird take territory here with some of the ideas that I have.
Yeah, that's all right.
But I don't know if they did some type of like job mastery system or like an alternate spec for all the jobs. Like that seems like a lot, obviously, but I don't know. Like they just gotta have some sort of branching path or something, maybe that like you can still play
Yeah.
current level 100 monk, for example, but you could also play like a slightly different version of it potentially. I don't know how that would work. I haven't put too much thought into this, but like how would
Yeah.
they do horizontal progression in that sense for you, like in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think what comes to mind first is, again, like going back to Final Fantasy XI, right? Because that game, for a really, really long time, the level cap in that game was 75. That was like the peak of Final Fantasy was, and people call it the 75 era, right? So it's like that's how important it was. And that game had a system called merit points, where after you hit level 75, you switched this thing in your menus that instead of getting XP points, you would start getting merit points. And you would go and kill stuff at the party, and you'd get merit points. Every time you filled up the bar, you'd get 1 point, and you could spend the points on upgrades. And every job had its own upgrade page, and you had two groups of merits. You had a group 1 set of merits and a group 2 set. And group 1 was like passive bonuses, so it'd be stuff like, the tanks would have like increased enmity generation, stuff like that, like increased HP, increased block chance on paladins, like stuff like that. And then the bottom would be active skill choices. So there would be skills in there that you could only learn by putting merit points in them. And there was, 4 or 5 of them, but you could only put enough points in to learn like 2 or 3 of them at a time. So you had to make a choice about which ones you wanted to pick. And I think that would be a really, really interesting system or something like it to integrate into 14, where you have, some passives that you get where like, maybe, you could even do like passives that are in the game now where it's like, oh, it increases this skill, and this skill's potency. And then like there's another passive that's, 3 different skills, and you can only pick 3 of them. So like your kit is kind of geared towards either your filler window or your burst window or something like that.
Sure.
But
So
I mean, obviously that's a terrible
like,
idea, but
yeah, there's definite complications that come with implementing some type of like skill tree system, right?
yeah,
into
sure.
the way the game currently works. Like you basically just throw balance out the window if you do that, or make it much more difficult to balance.
Yeah.
I think going that direction is something that would be really, really interesting and that I would like to see. I feel like we need something different other than just a couple new skills and play it safe. Like I would rather them take some risks and risk, some jobs just not being good, right? If it makes everything else more interesting.
Yeah. I think that right now, like risks are very rarely taken in this game. Like everything feels pretty safe.
Everything. This expansion has been incredibly safe so far.
Yeah, I mean
we'll see. There's still some big
the
stuff
content
coming,
design. But... Yeah. I mean, I'm super excited. Like I love all the fights so far. I mean, I think the content in this expansion has been as good as it's ever been. Really,
it's been fun for sure. Yeah, I think not to get too deep into combat design or anything, but I think some of the novelty of like the dungeons have worn off for me, where now they just feel like any other dungeon in the game, right? But
which ones do you mean?
Like pretty much just all the Dawn Trail dungeons. Like they were getting a lot of praise when the expansion released for just being like new and innovative. Like sure, there are some fun boss mechanics. I agree. I do think they're very solid boss fights in the dungeons themselves, but like, I don't know, it still just very much feels samey once you get back to them. Long term.
Yeah, I mean, once you're running expert roulette, everything kind of feels like expert roulette, right?
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of maybe like the critical mass that we're reaching in design right now, is that like at this point, if you do another safe expansion, it's going to be bad for the game, right? Like they need to do something crazy. I don't know what exactly, you know, I've got some ideas, none of them very well thought out, but it's like, you know, they got to do something to just inject some drama.
Yeah, so
Because
like
man,
going back to, I agree, definitely. Going back to like the sort of skill tree discussion, do you think it would be interesting if like you were able to spec into, obviously if you had that skill tree, I think it would be almost a necessity to be able to like respec pretty freely, or even have different like loadouts or something maybe. Where, you know, certain ones are built for dungeons or like AoE purposes, and others are built for like single target raiding. Do you think that is something that would be interesting, or just kind of
yeah, no, I
tedious?
definitely do. I think a really cool way that they could do that, I've actually thought about this a little bit more in particular, is like how would I implement a skill tree in 14? I think that a really interesting, oh, I just muted my mic. Oopsie. I think a really interesting way for them to do that would be to use the jobstone as like a vessel of some kind, and like, you know, in 8.0 our jobstone gets slots carved into it, and we can put like these newly designed special materia in it, and the materia have like, that's our skill tree, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like you're melding like unique materia into these slots on your jobstone, and it's fundamentally changing things about the job. And that way, if you want to change it, all you do is just unslot that materia and slot a new one in. And you know, it doesn't have to be materia exactly, it could be whatever.
Yeah, materia starts to get into a totally different topic, which is gearing.
Yeah,
and without
well,
trying to get into that too much, I do think there's a lot that they could do with materia, and like separating just some more build diversity with that specifically.
right, yeah. And when I say materia in that context, I just mean like the object, not necessarily like the item that we have in the game now. So sort of more like,
Makes
I
me
would
think
get-
of FF7 materia.
yeah, exactly. So it'd be like, you know, you would slot like a cure materia, and then you would slot like an all materia, and you like, now that makes my red mage ver cure an AoE. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah,
like having
that-
the ability to do that and swap those into different stuff would be really fun. And, or, you know, maybe I make it where like my follow-up combos on red mage, like my Verholy and Scorch and all that stuff, they're single target, but they do 10% more damage. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
something like that. Like, I think that would be a really cool way to sort of let people specialize into a thing without breaking balance too much, because there's always inherently a trade-off. So I think that something like that is probably the best way to do it. Now, whether they do that with like a jobstone, or if they add like a slot where you have like a trinket or a relic or something that's like expansion specific, and like we slot stuff into that, you know, sort of like a Destiny 2 type thing.
Bring back belts.
Yeah, yeah, there we go. Bring back belts, and they're just waist wraps full of materia, right?
Something. Yeah,
but
I don't know.
I think that a system like that could be really fun. You know, what do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a thought when I was recently thinking about the different roles in this game, where obviously you have all the DPS and then the tanks and the healers. And a lot of people kind of complain about supports being, I don't know, less fun, maybe. Maybe that's a simplified way of putting it, but I think that's reflected in what you see in Party Finder too. Like, there are just less people playing healer. You're always looking for healers.
Yeah.
So I had a crazy thought that was just like, what if everybody was a DPS? And you could have a system like what you're talking about that specializes it into like, maybe more people bring healing abilities, maybe, you know, people bring more tanky abilities or mitigation abilities or whatever. That would throw off the complete encounter design that we've had up until this point, which would make going back and doing past content maybe difficult unless it was separated in some way.
Yeah. The issue I see immediately with that is like role-based mechanics and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Like how would they design those? And then also it would become this weird thing where like certain jobs that have access to certain skills would just always get shoehorned into something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even in like, that's true of the system that I just talked about too. So it's like, I'm sure that the devs have probably thought about something like this, and then they're like, well, how the hell do we incentivize people to engage with it like correctly, you know?
Yeah, it just gets extremely complicated if you go down that
Super.
route in any direction,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and it's like the same thing goes for, you know, like you mentioned earlier, like having like a different like spec, like an offshoot of something. And I love that idea. Like I would love to see like, you know, like we have the class and job system already, right? Like we have gladiator that turns into paladin, but like what if there was another job? Like what if gladiator could turn into knight, you know, and it had a mace and a shield instead of a sword and a shield, and it had different, like the same general rotation, but it just had different abilities with different aesthetics. And so you could choose that if you wanted to. You know, and it's not going to reduce the effectiveness necessarily. It's just it plays slightly different. But then I wonder, you know, I look at something like World of Warcraft where, you know, that game has, I don't even know how many classes at this point, like 20 classes or something, but every class has 3 or 4 specs. So really the game has like 55 classes.
Yeah.
And it's just such a nightmare to balance that, you know? And as a result, stuff gets absolutely obliterated in balance and it just gets left behind. And I think that 14's biggest strength is that its balance is really competitive. And, you know, and obviously there's outliers, like Machinist is pretty weak right now. Summoner's pretty weak. Ninja, I think, has to work way too hard to deal damage right now.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's it's like all of this stuff that I would love to see for the health of the game in terms of like player expression, but also it's like that might not be good for the game in terms of
Also
overall health.
Yeah, just from like a dev workload standpoint, I don't see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been able to get a hat on my Viera for years now, so
Yeah, for 4 years. So I don't know where
have
in the world
very
they're gonna
low
come up with that.
expectations for like how much they're going to be adding to anything. So I know we're just kind of like fantasizing here about like what could be, but like realistically, what do I actually expect to happen, right? Like, oh man, I don't know.
Let's do that.
Yeah, that's a different conversation for sure. I don't have very high expectations, I'll be honest. It's like I can see them just kind of doing this again, maybe give us some different abilities here and there. Like they do have, like, every job's very burst heavy, so you can't really squeeze anything more in there. You could squeeze stuff in like all the filler phases. There's room, I guess. You start getting into button bloat territory there.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I think that's kind of the cap right now, and that's I think what my biggest concern is for 8.0 is that I feel like pretty much for every job, like burst windows are about as full as they can be.
Yep.
And it's not very interesting to just like throw OGCDs or extra buttons into fillers. I mean, that can get you by, but like that doesn't really change anything.
It's fun as a gimmick, like Dragoon, for example, like that's its whole gimmick, right?
Yeah, it has a ton of OGCDs now.
Yeah, but like I wouldn't want every single job in the game to be that, right?
Yeah, it's tricky for sure. And I don't know. I don't have a ton of expectations, but I do think that it's worth, like they've specifically said, right? Like in 8.0, we are changing the jobs, you know? And I think that that's worth mentioning just because, like, if there's one thing I will say about Yoshi P is that he definitely doesn't lie, right? When he says he's going to do something, he 9 times out of 10 does it, even if it doesn't come right away. The thing he's talking about happens eventually. And they definitely hear people, and people have made it very clear that identity is a problem. And I don't know. I don't know what I expect. I don't know if I have really high expectations, but I definitely think they're going to do something. I don't know what.
Yeah, I mean, they need to do something, I think. I am ready already. Like, this soon into the expansion, I'm ready for like a change, right? I think we'll have to see how the rest of this expansion plays out with all the content that comes out. How it all shapes up, see if any jobs do get any major adjustments in the way that like Paladin did in Endwalker. I could see that happening for maybe certain jobs. Maybe Dark Knight, maybe Summoner, maybe some minor stuff to Black Mage. I don't know.
I think that Dark Knight and Summoner are in desperate need, man. Those jobs are rough to play right now.
Yeah.
They're just so boring. It's insane.
Black Mage, or not Black Mage, Dark Knight feels very empty compared to what it used to. And it's like nothing's really inherently terrible about it. It's just like if you came at it fresh, this expansion, never having played Dark Knight before, it'd be like, this is fine, right? I don't know. It feels similar to like Warrior, but having played Endwalker Dark Knight, which was my favorite tank all throughout Endwalker, I just have no desire to touch that job anymore.
Yeah,
it just feels a little empty.
It definitely does. And I will say that is the one job where I will do the remember when this game was good for. Because, man, Heavensward Dark Knight was like so peak, dude. That shit was crazy. It was so fun. And the abilities that job had were crazy. It had stuff that, like, you know, because Warrior and Paladin were the only jobs in the game for an entire expansion, or the only tanks in the game, I should say. And they were different, but they weren't that different because Paladin couldn't block magic. So, like, all that it had was the passive physical block damage from shield. And then other than that, you know, it had a little bit more defensives and Warrior had more healing, and that was pretty much the difference. But then Dark Knight came out and it was just like so different. And it was so strong, man. It just, Dark Arts, the way that it used to work was so crazy. And I really think that they basically need to take Heavensward Dark Knight and modernize it and just put it back in the game. Because it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I've heard that sentiment from a lot of people talking about Dark Knight, and I don't have the experience with it, obviously.
Right.
But there are so many different things they could do with that job just to make it more interesting. The whole tank role, tank and healer both, are kind of samey when you compare the different jobs, right? Like, a lot of the tanks play very similarly. I don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily a problem. And it's kind of something that I wish they would lean into more with the healers, even. Because to go on another tangent here, you've got the pure healers and the shield healers, and like, I feel like they should just all do it all, maybe. Because lately I've just been stuck in Party Finder waiting on a shield healer. Like,
yeah,
I don't know why you can't just bring White Mage Astro and, you know, maybe just give each of them some more tools to mitigate and shield incoming damage.
It's a shame because Astro used to have the two sects that it could switch between.
Yep.
And one of them had the regen, one of them had the shield. And I don't know why. I mean, I understand why they got rid of it, because they want a reason to have two separate, like, healer classes, quote unquote.
Yeah, that was going into Endwalker, right? With bringing Sage in just to even it out, probably.
Yeah, I believe that was when that got dropped.
Yeah, because I remember having that when I was when I was leveling Astro back when I started.
Yeah,
and then it
and I mean,
got taken away, and I'm like, so yeah, it was start of Endwalker for sure.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, I understand why they did it in a sense, just because it sort of made that split, right, where now you have two pure and two shield.
Yeah,
but they ended up giving the pure healers shields anyway.
Yep.
And they end up giving the shield healers abilities that give regen anyway.
Yeah, they're so close.
like why even bother? You know, like,
yeah.
just give Astro that back. Give White Mage some shields. You know, give Sage some extra regens and rework Scholar, because Scholar's a nightmare. in my opinion. Hot take, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Scholar fan myself. I don't really play much healer, but
Yeah, I think that the fairy is I think she's overstayed her welcome. I'm sick of her. I'm sick of trying to deal with her.
I think that's the
Um,
clunkiest mechanic when it comes to
it's
job
so
design
brutal, man. Yeah, it's
out
terrible.
of anything.
Especially because they reworked Summoner, where summoning things like functions pretty well. Like I don't ever notice like a feeling of like jank when I'm playing Summoner.
You don't
I
need to
just
like
get
move your carbuncle around or anything.
Yeah, I just get a little bit bored, but like
Yeah.
everything happens when I want it to. Whereas with the fairy, and like it's definitely gotten better since, like it used to be just absolutely terrible how often you could ghost stuff with your fairy and drop abilities and they just never went off. But man, it still just feels pretty bad to like have to have this thing out.
Yeah.
And I'd almost rather it be like a cooldown where I hit the button and she comes down and she just casts passive heals and she tethers to somebody, almost like Automaton Queen on Machinist, Like she just appears, she does her thing, and then she disappears, and then I have to build it back up and summon her again. I feel like that would be a more satisfying play out, and you could connect it to like the DPS aspect of the job. So you're sort of engaging with different things, different aspects of the job to build and deal damage, and then that results in healing. Sort of like a Moira from Overwatch type thing, if you're familiar.
I have to think about that one. I know her.
She's got the 2 orbs. She shoots like a purple orb that deals damage, and then she can heal with her other hand.
Yep.
Yeah, so like I think that would be a really cool identity for Scholar to have, because they like threatened to do that with Sage, and then they were like, never mind, LOL, it's white mage with lasers.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, Cardia's cool. The new level 100 abilities, like those are nice.
Yeah, I love
it's
Sage. It's my favorite healer.
It's really not that
sure.
different than just throwing out like a off GCD regen, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, Sage is by far my favorite healer. It's the healer I play the most.
Yeah.
But when they were kind of pitching Sage, I was like, oh man, this is like, again, to go back to WoW, I was like, this is like Discipline Priest, which is, it's a priest spec in WoW that you deal damage, and when you deal damage, it puts out like an AoE heal around the target that you hit that heals all your party members.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that would be a really cool thing to have in Final Fantasy, because that's like an identity that doesn't exist. And they like kind of did that with Sage, sort of with Cardia, but not like super really. And that could just be a function of the fact that you're kind of just sitting there spamming one damage ability.
I think that's
which
my main
doesn't feel super
complaint.
fun.
Yeah, that's my main complaint with the healers. Like all their healing tools, their toolkits feel pretty solid in my opinion. I think Astro does the best job of it because their tools are just a little more engaging with some of, the timed mechanics to them.
Yeah.
Where he plays
Cards are
things
fun.
and then it pops up. They also have the cards, which I think Astro they hit it out of the park with that.
Yeah, no, I think Astro is probably the best designed healer in the game right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
and Lightspeed is cracked.
Yeah, like not even talking about how well it's performing at the minute, like it is the best healer for sure.
by a long shot.
But it's just, it feels to me to be the most engaging to play as well.
Yeah.
With its toolkits, with its like ever so slightly more interesting DPS rotation with the cards during burst.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not much, right? Like you're still sitting there pressing Malefic, but I don't know.
It's something.
It's something, right? Yeah. I think they just need more of that on the healers.
Yeah, and I was talking about this the other day with somebody, I can't remember who, but I was like, I really feel like the job design team has done a very good job since Endwalker with all of the new designs.
Yeah.
So like Reaper, Sage, Viper, Pictomancer, the new Paladin rework, the Dragoon and the Astro rework, all of those jobs like feel very complete. I think that they have very good designs, and I'm just really hoping that going into 8.0, every other job in the game starts to feel more complete like those jobs do. without them having to add too much fluff, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's just a matter of there being, what, 21 jobs in the game now, and you know,
So many.
it takes
So
time to
many.
polish them all to perfection. So like some will obviously hit that mark sooner than others, and you know, some will still need some tweaks, whatever that may be. Machinist's AoE, for example.
Oh my god, dude.
So like there's still some things that need to be worked out as far as job design goes, but I don't think they're moving in a terrible direction with it. Like
No, I
think,
agree.
like a lot of it's very fun, right?
Yeah, I think that the majority of the jobs in the game play really well. None of them feel like terrible to play, right? Like
Yeah.
all of them function at a level where I can play any of them and be fine with playing them. There's definitely some that I prefer to play than others. But yeah, I hope that we keep progressing going into 8.0, and whether we get a horizontal progression or we go to 110 or we get stat squished down to 60 or something or up 50 or whatever. I just hope that that feeling of completeness and fulfillment in the job design, I hope that that keeps going in the direction that it's going, because I think they're getting there. They're just not there with everything yet.
Yeah, for sure. You played a lot of Viper, right?
A lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's my main right now.
That's your
say.
main. How do you feel about the entire combo being on like 2 buttons, like the main GCD combo?
I don't have a problem with it, mostly because it was designed that way and it was always that way, right?
Sure.
Um,
It's a lot of
like,
buttons too, right? Like there's
yeah, I mean,
how many
it's,
branching paths?
So it's 4 finishers, it's 2 openers,
Yeah.
2 second steps, and then 4 finishers. So you'd have
That's a lot. Yeah. That's
8
too many.
buttons on your bar for that, just for your standard filler combo, your GC combo,
Gotcha.
which is crazy. And then you've got 2 openers, 2 second steps, and 2 finishers for your AoE combo as well. So yeah, that would be nuts in terms of buttons.
Yeah, because to be fair, I haven't played enough of the job. I want to get into it soon. I've just been like, it's been last on the list because of gearing. I just don't have gear for it yet. I'm getting there, but that's next on my list to play, probably after Ninja. But I don't love the 2-button thing, and yeah, when you actually break it out with it being that many, like, okay, I can see why. Like, I've personally kind of wished that like you could separate it and it would feel maybe more like Samurai's rotation, where like you do a couple different combos, but it's more than that, seemingly.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think that if they were gonna do that, what they would probably have to do is have it be almost like Summoner, where you have like 2 buttons that transform depending on which opener you press. So like maybe you'd have your 2 openers on separate buttons, and then you'd have 2 buttons, or like 1 button for the second step and 1 button for the third step. And it would just switch depending on which opener you pressed, basically, because you're always following the combo in one direction, right? Like I felt like a 10,000 IQ genius when I finally cracked the case on how the job gauge works.
yeah, I'm still
Because
working
the
on
job
that one.
gauge is it does nothing for you really, except for the glowing swords. That's the
Yeah,
only
left or
part you have to
right
pay
on
attention
the
to,
gauge, right?
Yeah, so if you put your buttons in that order, you can look down and just see which button to press, which is like, that's cool. And there's certain things about Viper that I don't love. I wish that the audio cue, or that there was some visual cue for rattling coils hitting 3 stacks. Because if you're like really focused on mechanics, it's very easy to overcap that and not notice. Same for your Vice Winder. If you're having to disengage a lot, those 40 seconds run up pretty quick, and you're sitting on 2 stacks and you just like you don't know it until you look down and you're like, shit.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's things about it that I don't love, but I think that it's a really well designed job overall. The 2 buttons doesn't bother me, but I think that it would bother me on other jobs. So, like you mentioned Samurai, like Samurai was my main from Stormblood to Dawn Trail. Um, and so if that job got its buttons combined into like 3 buttons, that would blow my brain to a million pieces. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, like if they did that to Dragoon, I would stop playing this job.
Yeah, because you're so used to it, right? Like the cycle of going down your bar and then going up and hitting the finisher, Drake's
Oh yeah,
Bane
the
now, I
muscle
guess,
memory
instead of switching.
alone. I'm still hitting positionals on Drake's Bane even though it doesn't have one.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
and I
no,
still do it on Monk too.
yeah, for sure. I'm just not a huge fan of that 2-button thing on Viper specifically. Like again, I haven't played it enough, so I'm sure I would get into the flow of it more, but I don't know. It's just like
Yeah.
the repetition of it. I feel the same way on other jobs that spam a single button a lot.
Yeah.
Like
I
pressing
will say that
fell cleave on Warrior. It's just like, okay.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bored.
Yeah, I don't know. Summoner.
Yeah, I will say that I think Viper, it has enough going on that just about the time you're like, okay, I'd really like to hit something other than 1 and 2, your ire gauge is filled up and you're going into Reawaken, right? Like,
Sure.
I think that
Yeah,
that
then you're
job
all
is
over the place.
designed very tightly, where like it's also a gauge positive job, which is really cool. So you get a free Reawaken, I think every 3 minutes you get one for free. Because your buff that gives you a free Serpent's Ire, I think it's called, that gives you a free Reawaken, that has 120-second cooldown. It's a 2-minute, but you generate like 70 gauge in 2 minutes if you just hit your basic combos.
Interesting. Yeah.
So you're always positive.
Unlike Reaper.
So as long as yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Reaper's
Reaper
awful.
is either neutral or negative depending on how you play it.
Yeah, I did my reclears on Reaper this week for the first time. And
Yeah, how was that?
it was fine, right? Like I don't love that job, but I wanted to try it. And like I played well, right? But it's just not my favorite job at the end of the day. I need more practice on it too. I think that's all it really comes down to. It's just, it feels very tight and kind of punishing if you screw anything up, more so than a lot of other jobs. But
yeah, I would say that Viper and Reaper, I think, feel very similar, and I don't think that that's like a mistake. Like, they both kind of have this 2 stacks of a thing that you need to press pretty much on cooldown with like Soul Slice and Vicewinder, and like those unlock new combos for you to press.
yeah, the
with,
follow-ups
gluttony and all that
feel
stuff.
identical.
Yeah, they're very, very similar. They have like the same like rear flank positionals
For
with
each of
that
them.
like buff
Yep.
each other. So yeah, I mean, they're a very similar job design, but Viper feels a lot more forgiving, because man, if I need to like run away from the boss, I can just sling Vicewinders or Uncoiled Furies rather.
Yep.
And those things are like 700 potency.
Oh yeah,
bro.
that's
like you can
that's
just
wild.
rock
I don't
those
know
things
why
out. It's
there's so
insane.
much potency.
It's so strong. Well, it's an integral part of the kit. Like
Sure.
you use them even in melee. But
Yeah, because it
like
does so
I
much
hold
damage.
them. Yeah, I hold them. Like in M4, I'll burn 2 of them at the beginning, and then I'll hold the other 3, or I'll hold the 2 that I get after that for Witch Hunt, because I can basically throw those and do all of Witch Hunt and then just hit like my filler GCD a couple times, and no matter where I'm at in Witch Hunt, I'm back on the boss at that point.
Yeah,
so
and
it's
you just
like
have
a
enough of
crazy
them to
strong
play
tool.
with, right?
Yeah. I mean, you get 3, and I try to keep 1 at all times just in case I need to disengage. But sometimes I'll just throw all 3 of them.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna get them back. You get 1 every 40 seconds by default. Every time you hit Vicewinder,
it's
and
not
then
like
you
you
also
can
get 1 every 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's not like you can fit all 3 of them in burst if you're doing your combo twice in buffs anyway. So it's like they're literally just free to use wherever.
Yeah, you can just chuck them. And I think that I think that Reaper or Viper rather is an interesting template for other melee jobs to follow, because it has a lot of like integration with its single target and AoE rotations. and its disengage tools are really powerful. Slither, the gap closer, is like absolutely nuts that you can target party members with that.
Yeah, it's just thunderclap, right? You get 3 stacks of it pretty much.
Yeah, and like I have a macro that I set my focus target to like my color stack partner for all the savage fights.
Yeah.
And I can be anywhere on the freaking arena and I'm just like whoop, and I'm there. You know, like I'm in position instantly as long as he is.
Yeah, I set all that up on Monk. I set it up slightly differently. It's not focus target. It's just targeting like a tank, a healer, and a DPS, and I can reorder the party list if I need to.
Yeah.
But I haven't gotten to that. Like I've only done reclears on Monk for like 2 weeks now, so I haven't played with that yet. But no, that's like being able to dash to a party member is so good.
Yeah, I think that that's a utility that just like every melee DPS should have, because it's so pivotal for like repositioning and also maintaining uptime. It's crazy how good it is. It's insane.
Yeah.
Like even if Viper did slightly less damage, I might play it just because it has so many tools for every scenario.
Yeah, it's just chill, right? Like you've got movement, you've got range, like you don't have to work quite as hard as some other jobs.
Yeah, it's in a really good spot. So I think that if the other melees kind of get brought up to where Viper's at, as far as like design language and clarity, I think that we'd be in a really good spot overall.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the melee, like I think melee is the best designed and balanced role in the game currently.
I would agree. Yeah, I think it's the most cohesive group of jobs that feel the best.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when you look at casters or phys ranged, it's just like there's so much disparity there. But melee is all pretty tight knit. Like everything is more or less similar, right? Obviously, you have like samurai, which is very different to ninja damage profile wise, and like, but it all evens out closely enough, in my opinion, that like, I don't know, if you're bringing 2 melee, there's the ability to mix and match and get a really good comp going.
I think the cool thing about the melee role right now is that none of them feel like a bad choice, right?
Sure.
Like all of them have strengths and weaknesses, whereas like if I'm playing Fizz ranged, I'm pretty much gonna pick Dancer probably every time, just because the support is so crazy. Or I'm definitely not picking Machinist. You know, I might pick Bard, but I feel like Machinist, you know, it's just like there's so much stuff about it that feels weird.
It's funny. I'm like the complete opposite with the Fizz ranged.
That's interesting. Yeah, I played a lot of Dancer and Shadowbringers.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like my guilty pleasure job, I guess.
Sure. Dancer is fun. Don't get me wrong. I never fell in love with the design of it. I don't know. Dancing.
Not a proc guy, huh?
Not my thing. The procs, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that either.
I've
but
always
like
prop
just
design.
like the job fantasy of it, it's not my thing. But
Sure, yeah, that's totally understandable.
like I love Machinist. I think Machinist is in an incredible spot for like rating single target wise. As far as the rotation goes, like it is so fun to play. It's so cool looking.
Machinist is super fun. I'm pretty much only play melee in a raid environment.
Yeah.
And so if I'm playing a Fizz ranged, it's usually like a 24 man or it's a dungeon or something like that.
Yeah.
And the other Fizz range just like feel way better in those environments to me. But man, it does feel really good to hit Full Metal Machinist. That ability is sweet.
Yeah, so many of the new abilities are sweet. I feel like that job got such a good upgrade with the 90 to 100 abilities.
Yeah, that one feels really good. I like the new OGCD animations a lot. Double check and checkmate, I think they're called. Those are really cool. I kind of wish that they had done something with Queen. That might be a hot take.
Yeah, delete it.
I kind of wish Queen. yeah.
Let me disable it from when other players summon it, so I don't have to look at it. That thing jump scares me so much.
Dude, that would be a cool, like, what if, going back to our skill tree thing, like, I can't summon Queen anymore, but when I hit the button, I just get, like, extra damage for 15 seconds, you know?
Yeah,
Like you turn it into a steroid, you know?
something.
That I think that there's a lot of cool stuff that they could do like that. And I hope that they do.
It's just unfortunate that with Machinist that with this new MSQ that canonically they use rubber bullets, and that's why it's doing so little damage currently.
Yeah. They forgot to put the real bullets in it.
Yep. So maybe we'll get some real bullets next patch, but who knows?
Well, I feel like the only role we haven't really talked about at this point is casters. So how do you feel about
Picto is the new addition, right? So I love Pictomancer. It's obviously pretty much one of the strongest jobs in the game now. Party utility wise, movement, ease of play, damage.
Dude,
it is probably the best job in the game at the minute.
How good is Smudge?
Smudge is the best movement ability. It's just it's so much fun to press too.
It's crazy. It's so good.
Yeah, it's somehow more fun than like Thunderclap, Slither. Like just being able to go any direction instantly. Like it feels more responsive than on Avant.
And you get the sprint afterwards, which is really good.
Yeah, you get basically like expedience afterwards.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I love that job. It's just fun, right? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I was really skeptical. You know, I was like team Green Mage or team Geomancer before they revealed it. I was sure. And they did the fake out with the cryo ring and everything.
Yep.
But when they first revealed Pictomancer, I was like, man, no way they're doing this, because it's going to look so goofy. It's going to be so out of place. But the more I saw it and the more I played it, I was like, I don't know, man, this kind of feels super like normal. Like it
there's
feels
enough
like
goofy
it
out of
belongs.
place. There's enough goofy out of place stuff in this game that it fits.
Yeah, and it feels super good to play, man. I mean, the job is so much fun. Pretty much the only complaint that I have is I don't love the fact that the motifs are 3 steps where you have to paint it and then render it and then cast it. I don't love that. I think that that's maybe one, like, you could probably cut out a step of that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's cool though because it gives it a lot of flexibility.
Definitely, yeah. I was gonna say it's difficult because it takes a long time and you have to think about it, but
you can do it whenever you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you can paint stuff so far in advance
and even
then render it.
Even your hammer combo, like you can just prep it, like paint it and then prep it, and then like it's like a 30-second buff you get, so you don't even have to use it for like whatever 26 seconds or something, whatever it takes to get the combo out. 24 seconds or so.
You can just sit on it for a while.
Use it for movement. Like it doesn't break the combo if you use other abilities in between those hammer hits. So like you can just do whatever you want on that job and it like works out. Obviously you need to put everything under buffs and like be prepped for buffs.
Yeah.
But it's not hard to do
a job. That is definitely a job that feels very like ad hoc to me.
Yeah.
It's sort of just like, I know that I need to hit these buttons in my 2-minute window, but the order and the way that I get there is pretty much completely up to me. And that's a super cool design. I think that more jobs should do that. You know, again, it feels very complete and it feels very like meaningful and on purpose. Whereas some jobs, I feel like they kind of just like stumbled into it.
Yeah, it's just really interesting how a lot of the skills work too. Like they just feel really unique, I guess. Like you've just got like varying cast times, like just different levels of like impact from different skills. Like hitting that hammer combo feels super satisfying. Hitting like Comet feels pretty good with the instant cast, and like I don't know, swift casting like a motif and then having 3 seconds of free movement, like where you don't have to press buttons if you have to like focus on a mechanic or whatever, or just run across the arena or whatever. Like you can do that and keep full uptime, and it's just like there's just so many options with it, and they all feel
it's very
really
very
good.
flexible. I love also, like you mentioned, like separate, like different cast times. I think that that's a really cool like thing to put in, because I feel like that's like the one part of Summoner that I really enjoy, is that you kind of have to think about where you're going to place each avatar, because like if I pop Ifrit right before I have to move a bunch, like I might just not get to use half the stuff, you know?
Yeah, no, that's like the strong point for Summoner for sure.
Yeah. So
Um,
I love that design, and I think that even Red Mage kind of has a cool way around that with the dual cast. Like I think that that's a fun way to sort of give Red Mage like this like hopscotch effect where you kind of like stop and then move and then stop and then move, and you have this really fun back and forth, which kind of just leaves me at like Black Mage, I think, is like the weakest feeling caster right now.
Yeah, Red Mage is really cool too with the addition of Grand Impact after Acceleration, which
Yes,
just gives you
love that.
another free instant cast whenever you
Yeah,
use
and
Acceleration.
you can just throw that whenever you feel like it, and then
Yeah.
you also get your instant cast on Verstone or Verthunder
From Acceleration, yeah, so you get 2
yeah.
back-to-back instants, and like
It-
I don't know, Red Mage feels really good right now. I think it's fairly underrated at the minute. Just like half the
I love
time
Red Mage.
I'm in PF and we have like a Picto or something, and like both healers go down, I'm like, we don't really need the damage. I wish we had a Red Mage right now.
Yeah,
Like it's still a great job. I think it's one of the most stylish jobs in the game, honestly.
yeah.
Just
It's
just from all the
definitely-
animations and everything. It looks cool.
And the drip, dude. I love their gear.
Yeah, look at you. With
It's
your
a
hat.
cool looking job. Yeah. Yeah, it's actually, this is the most recent. I got it to 100, I think, yesterday or the day before. I've always loved Red Mage. I played a lot of it when it first came out. And I don't know. I think it's probably my favorite caster right now. I really enjoy Picto, but something about Red Mage like resonates with me a lot.
Yeah.
And it might just be like nostalgia because I played a lot of Red Mage in 11 as well.
Sure.
But I mean, it was obviously completely different.
No, I
But,
feel the
like-
same though. Like I think Red Mage is probably my favorite caster. I think Picto is bringing more to the table at the minute, so
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
tempted
No, I
to play
definitely-
that. Like on my alt, I am gearing my Picto. I already bought the upgraded tome weapon, and I've been slowly throwing all my extra raid drops over to Picto. But yeah, I would not mind playing some Red Mage either. I just wish it did a little more damage.
Yeah, for sure.
But honestly, the res is actually that valuable that it makes sense that Red Mage does slightly less. Whereas
Yeah, I
when you
think
look at
that-
Summoner, it doesn't translate quite as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that Red Mage's ability to instant cast two like heal res back to back without running out of mana.
Yep.
Is
Yeah, you can
like,
back-to-back res for a
That's-
while.
insane. Like no other job in the game can do that, period.
Yeah, you can get like 4
And-
people up in like the span of 10 seconds.
Yeah, and then you just pop Lucid Dreaming and hang out for a while and you're back at full MP.
Yep.
And it's insane.
And this raid tier specifically, with how recoverable some of the fights are,
Yeah.
with
yeah,
the
a lot
lower
of the
DPS
fights are
checks,
very,
like, there's a lot of value
very
there.
recoverable. Yeah, absolutely.
I do think
so,
Red Mage
yeah.
is on the more difficult side for the casters, though. I would say it's harder to play than Picto.
Yeah, I think it's definitely harder to play like optimally for
Yeah.
sure.
You can
And it's
squeeze by with
way harder than
whatever.
Summoner for sure.
Yeah. It's fun though. I love it.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's my favorite. Picto's really cool, but Red Mage will forever have my heart, I think, in the caster role.
Yeah, it's just sad that it's getting outclassed by Picto's like absurdity with how broken that job is.
Yeah, I was really expecting the nerf bat to come down on Picto pretty hard.
It wouldn't have
and,
felt bad if it did. I think
yeah,
that's like the
I-
rare case where they could have nerfed a job.
and it would have been completely fine
Yep.
because it's so strong, it's crazy.
Yeah,
I don't-
and that brings us to Black Mage, which is in the same class as Picto, but it's just worse in every single way. There's
Yeah, and you have
no
to try-
redeeming factor for Black Mage at the minute, other than it
And you
being
have to try
Black Mage.
10 times harder to do
Anything.
almost as much damage.
It has a personal shield. That's all it's got going for it. But it's got worse movement. It has no party buff. Has no party heal. Has no party shield. It's got
Yeah.
AM. You can teleport to somebody, I guess. You can bring your ley lines to you now. That's cool. But
Yeah.
I don't know. From what
Well,
I've
again,
heard, I haven't played a lot of Black Mage, but the addition of Flare Star has made the rotation even more strict than it used to be. And
yeah,
like,
that's been a
harder to
very
execute.
contentious addition for sure. People are pretty upset by that because, from what I understand, again, I don't play a ton of Black Mage, but it seems like the big complaint is that it has a cast time. A lot of people are saying that if Flare Star was instant, apparently that would sort of solve a lot of the problems that Black Mage has right now as far as timing goes.
Yeah, I won't pretend like I know what I'm talking about with Black Mage at all.
Yeah, I have no idea. But from what I read on the whatevers, a lot of people say that Flare Star having a cast time is the biggest problem. And I saw some people saying that it should function more like the Bard arrow, I forget what it's called, where you can use it at like 50 gauge, but it gets stronger if you have more.
Yeah. You could use
People
it
are
without full
saying
stacks. That would be
that,
nice.
Yeah, if you could just like at one stack it dealt X potency, and then for every stack you had over that, it gained potency.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, and it would be nice if you could carry those stacks through ice phase as well.
Yeah, for
if
sure.
If you swap
yeah.
to ice, it just gets cut off and you gotta
They
reset.
go away. Yeah. Yeah.
Luckily,
And,
you can use it with no MP. So like if you despair at the end of your fire combo, you can like just, I don't know, do some Xeno fillers and like use it whenever you're safe to do so before going to ice.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I don't know. Again, I'm not going to pretend like I know what I'm talking about with this job, but it's just in a bit of a sad state. It really just needs a buff, in my opinion. Like if they're like, I don't see them reverting all of the MP tick changes that they did.
Yeah, I don't think so.
To bring back the non-standard play that was, you know, that everyone was a big fan of in Endwalker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that coming back, unfortunately. But like, honestly, if they're going to keep it how it is, it needs like a pretty drastic buff. Like it's doing okay now. It's like nearing Pictomancer, but like Pictomancer just brings so much more utility that like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
why.
I mean that's the real issue, is that it's like it's nearing Pictomancer, but Pictomancer has a party shield and a movement ability that also gives sprint, and it has a party buff that makes everybody deal damage, and it's like
Star Prism's
there's
a
all
party
of this
heal.
stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, it's insane. Like it has so much ability, or so much utility rather, in its abilities, that the fact that it does more damage than Black Mage at all is a problem to me.
Yeah, you can like slide cast every single cast on Picto just fine, like with a weave afterwards. Like I don't know why there's a weave slot on every single ability. Like when you're in your what is it, subtractive palette combo, when you use your gauge, like I feel like those should act more like Fire 4s, where like they're longer casts maybe.
Yeah, and I mean they are slightly, but I think that they should be longer than they are.
You can still weave. There's still a weave slot after them.
Yeah, no, you can throw a holy for sure, or a meteor or whatever.
So I don't know. Like it's just a bit too free to do more damage on Picto. Where on Black Mage, it's like you're stressing it.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. A lot of me wonders if Pictomancer will get changes in 7.1, and they just didn't want to do them yet because people were really excited to play it, and they kind of wanted to see what would happen.
But then there's Viper, where they immediately removed Noxious.
Yeah, but you know what I will say, as you know, somebody's been playing Viper a lot. That change didn't really change the job at all.
Yeah. How did you apply that? Was that just one of the two
it was
starter
one
combos?
Of the starters.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's just Death's Design from Reaper, but instead of having to hit a separate button, it was built into the combo. That's all it was.
So basically like putting up your current damage and haste buff, it's just like happens at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it
was...
I was just going to say, that's my one complaint about Viper. Like, I get it, that's not really impactful that they took that away, right? But I feel like that was one thing that gave that job some identity, where it's not like even huge, right? Like that's hardly anything, but I feel like Viper just needs something that's more Viper-y. snake-like, snake bite, like
Well,
poison dot, something.
yeah, I mean, I'd love to see a dot, like an actual dot, not a damage up
Yeah.
debuff. I'd be fine with seeing a dot. I'd be fine with the fact that they don't have a defensive that deals like reactionary damage is like the most missed shot of all time.
I don't know
because how in
why
the world-
Dragoon didn't get one in Viper also.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially considering how good Samurai's new one is.
When Samurai and Monk exist.
Yeah, I mean,
don't
Monk
know.
has a freaking party heal, man, like straight up. And
Plus mantra.
Samurai's, yeah, and then Tengensu is like actually insane. Like that ability
just
is nuts.
because it's every 15 seconds, yeah.
Well, and you get, was it minus? It's 10% mit for like
10%
9
mit.
seconds.
It's 4 seconds, and then if you get hit when it's up, it procs a regen, gives you gauge, and extends the mit for another 9 seconds.
Yeah, that's insane.
Every
dude.
15 seconds. So you can basically
Yeah.
keep full uptime on your mit if there are
Well,
mechanics.
it's basically 100% uptime if you're getting hit.
If you get hit, yeah. Like if you stand in something, you could probably near like 90% uptime that.
Arcane Crest is still really, really strong.
Yep.
And it's just like, man, the fact that those abilities exist and then Viper and Dragoon just have nothing is like, that feels so bad, dude.
It does. I mean, I don't know. There are a lot of times on Dragoon where I wish I had something. M3 comes to mind when like that proximity jump happens. Where the boss jumps away and like you've got to be like out at max melee and then like even take a step out further. Like I wish I just had a personal that I could kind of tank that with a little more.
Yeah, just to help my healers out, because otherwise what I end up doing there is I get hit and then I either pop Bloodbath before I gap close back in and keep
Bloodbath's
going,
not
or I
saving
just,
you though.
I know, yeah. I almost always end up having to hit second wind there and
Yep.
burn my second wind.
Yeah, you gotta like get a hit in, gap close, double weave gap close, second wind, and then like get to your spot at the same time. And it's just like, I don't know, if I could just prep a personal mitt beforehand, that would be a lot more
Or
comfortable.
I can just play Samurai and hit one button.
Yeah, and just be out at range, like casting something, and not even have to worry about the proximity. I don't think you do that there, but I don't think it lines up with the Madare. But Samurai's range is crazy too. That's something new that I've been experiencing.
Yeah, that was something that they changed in Endwalker actually. They
I know
increased
that's
the range on all your EI jutsus, and that was like a big change. That was huge.
That feels really good this tier though, because I did
it feels very good.
I did like 6 weeks of reclears on my alt on Samurai, so I played that a lot. And that's the hardest melee in my opinion by far. I don't know. It's I've been playing slow Samurai, so it's like,
oh yeah, never mind. That's cursed. Yeah.
It's really not that bad. Like you just go into your Makio at like 15 seconds left on Higanbana and like it lines up pretty well. But yeah, you've got to pay attention a lot more. There's a lot more like thought and planning and just like freestyling that happens, which is entertaining. I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. I've been playing fast because I'm so used to Endwalker Samurai that like I can't do the offset windows.
Yeah, Endwalker being like a smooth loop. I did play it some in Endwalker, not a whole lot. Enough to know what I was doing with it. And like it did feel really good. And I know you can play fast Sam now, and it's basically very similar, if not the same.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I really like just being able to kind of freestyle more so on Samurai. Like even if it's not completely optimal, just like having the option to do so. Like if I mess something up and it just all goes out the window, like I can still do pretty good damage just pressing whatever.
Yeah, and you can always recover it. Like, I mean, the best part about Samurai is that like, as long as you're keeping Higanbana up and you're hitting your Tsubames roughly in burst windows and you're getting in your OGCDs in burst windows, then like you're good, like
yeah,
you're dealing damage and you're cooking.
I think Samurai and Pictomancer are both great examples of, slightly less strict rotations that like, it's not like super flexible. Like you can move some things around here and there. Like with the follow-up to Madare, like you can, like that no longer breaks a combo. So like you can start building up your stickers again and like have 3 back-to-back Madares now. Like, that's pretty wild.
Super fun.
Like, just having something like that on more jobs would be beneficial, I think.
I agree. Yeah. No, I think that flexibility in the kit and also in the playstyle is going to be what determines success for a lot of future designs. Being able to do things in a different way, do things how you want to, fit things in different places. Because it seems like that's sort of the design that they're going with as we go forward. You know, Viper has a lot of that. Pictomancer has a lot of that. You know, like the new, like Paladin, like I feel like that kind of has a lot of that as well with the new combos, and it has that OGCD to follow up on Confetti your combo that you can sort of just fit wherever you need to fit it. So I think we're heading in that direction, and I think that that's a good direction to be moving in.
Yeah, I don't know about Paladin too much. I know that job's like fairly strict with the rotation, GCD wise, like, but yeah, what you're saying, just like some OGCD stuff for sure. Like, there's a lot of jobs, like even Red Mage has some of that with the like OGCDs that pop up during your melee combo at the end of it. Like, you can just kind of put them in different spots, which I don't know, it's cool. A lot of the gauge-based jobs where like you press your buff or whatever, your 2-minute button, and it doesn't give you gauge anymore, it just lets you use your burst. That's a really nice change from Dawntrail, which gives more flexibility. Cool. Not much. No, it just lets you carry more gauge up front, right? But like, you're not going to overcap, I guess. I don't know. That's like a little one that doesn't really impact things too drastically, I don't think, but
yeah, no, for sure. It just makes I think that change where like, you know, like Manification and Grim Harvest or whatever it's called on Reaper.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know.
Whatever that ability's called. Though, like those two things, like not giving gauge, I think just makes, if you do forget to do something, like you can still use those buttons on cooldown to keep them rolling.
Yep.
And not like drop a bunch of abilities, you know? And I think that that's just like a really good like quality of life change for the player, where it just makes the job feel a little bit better to play.
Sure.
That like, if I'm really wrapped up in mechanics and I look down on Viper and I've got 90 gauge and like my free reawaken button's coming off a cooldown in 5 seconds, I'm not like, oh man, I just wasted a whole reawaken, you know? Like I can still press it after 5 seconds and I can still go in and I just get to do it. And now I just have extra gauge laying around and I didn't really lose anything.
Yeah, you just get that one use like before or after your burst, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I have one that falls out of the burst, but I still get the full burst in.
Yep. Yeah, it's like the same with Red Mage. Like you can go in with do a triple melee combo, but like you don't really need to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think that that's a really good design philosophy, and you know, like I said, I think that we're moving in that direction. So that's very satisfying to see, and I hope that they just keep that momentum up for sure.
Yeah, the quality of life stuff is definitely nice, and I think some jobs still need it for sure. Speaking of like Scholar, I don't know how they go about that. Again, I don't really know. That's another job I don't know a whole lot about. I know how to play it well enough, but I haven't put an ounce of thought into how to improve that job.
Yeah, I leveled Scholar through a Summoner. I don't.
I was the opposite actually. I didn't touch. Well, I did a little bit of Summoner leveling, but that was just when I had to do like an alliance or something.
Scholar just like melts my brain. I can't. No matter how many times I read the tooltips and how much I try to understand it, and like, I mean, I can get by. You know, I know what the buttons do and I can play it. But man, if you drop me in like a high-end environment, I would not save anybody.
There'd be some panic going on. I think the worst the worst part for me with Scholar is the Aetherflow stacks. I think that's what it's called.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like you want to use those for damage, but like all of your healing abilities are tied to them as well.
All the really, really strong ones are tied to it, yeah.
So it's just like, well, I guess we'll forego this Sacred Soil to do an extra 100 potency or whatever it is, right? Like,
yeah, that was something I thought about like when the tooltips first started coming out for Dawntrail, and they showed Seraphism for the first time, and I saw that it doesn't stack with what's it called, dissipation. Like you can't use them, you have to use one or the other.
Yeah.
And I was like, man,
weird.
yeah, but I was like, man, I bet you there's gonna be people that just choose to never hit Seraphism for whatever reason.
Yeah, I have no
I don't
idea.
know.
It's I know a lot of people like Scholar, and it's pretty much the meta pick at the moment for shield healer, like just because of chain strat, right?
Chain strat is so good. Expedience is so good.
It's a very solid job. It's just like awkward feeling, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's one that I think I would have to like sit down and play a lot of it to like really have a ton of opinions about it.
Yeah.
Other than just like the fairy feels a little jank.
I think that's kind of the consensus though, like from people who actually know how to play it. Like, I don't think that's a hot take.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think that's a pretty cold take, probably.
Yeah.
Well, we've pretty much talked about everything that's in the game now, but one thing I did want to ask you is, what jobs do you think they will add in the future? Or do you think that we've kind of hit the point where maybe we don't need any more jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need another fizz ranged, right?
Absolutely.
That's the one that's got the least. We're getting Beastmaster as well, which will be interesting to see what category that falls into this expansion.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like, what's it called? Blue Mage is obviously a caster, but Beastmaster could be a number of things potentially.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at like, you know, previous Final Fantasy games as an inspiration, like, I feel like the two choices for Beastmaster are either going to be a whip, which could put it in fizz ranged, or it's going to be axes, which would obviously put it in melee. I don't know which one is more likely. I kind of personally, I think I lean towards axes just because of like the Bozja stuff. Those Beastmasters all used axes. And it might be weird to like pull the bait and switch with the whip at that point. But
yeah, I have
you
no
know,
idea.
they could easily do that, because who's to say our Beastmaster isn't like, I think it really depends on what direction they're going to go with Beastmaster, where if they're going to go like the Final Fantasy XI route, where it's like a more like kind of naturalist, like gruff survival type vibe, where you're with this companion animal and you're out there in the wilderness, like soloing stuff and carrying on, then I think they'll probably do axes. But if they do the Blue Mage thing, where they kind of lean into like this entertainer, like circus lion tamer type vibe that I'm terrified they're going to do, then it might be a whip.
Well, it's kind of hinted at that. That's kind of like Aaronville's thing, right? Maybe. That's like the best clue we've gotten, that he's the one out like studying all the creatures and everything. Like I could see that story leading into that, maybe.
But yeah, that's definitely a potential. I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, I've heard that theory thrown around a bit. So I have no idea. I haven't thought about it. I don't know the backstory of Beastmaster itself. And this isn't really, you know, any consideration to your original question, because it's going to be a limited job anyway, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day.
Sure.
Whatever it is, it's going to be useful in like a couple pieces of content, and it'll be fun. Like I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, I don't know. I think we get a Viz ranged, and who knows, maybe a tank, maybe another healer. I could see another support maybe, but
yeah, I mean,
no
I
idea.
think that there's some space, because like when I think about new jobs, like a lot of people are like, they're not even going to add any more new jobs. They're done adding new jobs. But I remember Mr. Happy did an interview with Yoshi P, and I don't remember if it was at a fan fest or if it was at a media tour, but he basically asked him like, hey, we're getting to the point where we have, you know, 21 jobs in the game, and at what point are you guys going to just like stop making jobs because there's too many, and just work on the jobs that are already in the game? And Yoshi P was like, do you really think that people would let us just like not put a new job in the expansion? Like, do you really think that we could do that?
Yeah.
And Mr. Happy was like, yeah, you know, you're probably right. Like, people would be pissed if that happened.
I think for 8.0, honestly, I would not be surprised to see just a Fizz ranged.
Yeah, I think they're gonna move to doing one job per expansion is kind of my prediction.
Yeah.
I think doing two and redoing all the job identity is gonna be very hard.
Yeah, now's the time to do just one if they're
Yeah.
going to, like, just to level out the number of jobs across the
agree, yeah.
roles, and then, you know, implement some other type of system on top of that. I think that would be a really good balance.
Yeah, because then all the stuff that's old feels new again, and then you also get still something that's actually new.
Yep.
But okay, so let's say they add a fizz range. What weapon do you think we should
Oh, man.
see?
I have no idea. I'm not like super knowledgeable about like every last Final Fantasy game or anything, so
Sure, sure.
we have gun, we have bow, we have whatever dancer is, chakrams.
Throwing weapons.
Yeah, like some type of crossbow comes to mind, but
Yeah,
like
I think that a whip job could actually be a really interesting thing to do for a fizz range.
Yeah.
And have them play like slightly more in than a regular fizz ranged. And you know, there's a lot of demand for a dot job, like a damage over time job.
outside
I
of
think
Bard.
fizz ranged is like, yeah, well, you know, they have the two, but like that's it.
Yeah.
But I think people are looking for a job that's sort of more like old Summoner, where you had, you know, Summoner and Heaven's Word had, I think, 2 or 3 dots, and you had a button that would spread all your dots to all the targets that you hit with it, and you, your Fester and whatever the AoE one is, did bonus damage based on how many dots the target was suffering from when you press the button.
Interesting.
So like Summoner used to be like the dot mage. It was a really cool identity, but it didn't feel like Summoner. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
it was like Affliction Mage or something. And then you just also had an Ifrit Eggy out that was just hitting stuff. So I think that there's a space there for like a really cool job where you like stack dots, and then you can do an attack that like deals extra damage based on how many dots are ticking. And then like you have a big hit that like consumes all your dots and does like a big damage blow up in one attack. Yeah, there's a really interesting space to play in there, and I think that a fizz range job would be a really cool spot to put that, because you'd have that ability to play at a distance and kind of do things freely and keep those dots ticking all the time. Because I feel like if it was melee, you'd have to disengage and your dots would fall off, and it would suffer really bad from that.
Yeah. I could see, you know, if they did go crossbow potentially, like you could have different types of bolts, and like some of them could be poison or whatever, and they could do some
like the
interesting
Monster
stuff.
Hunter approach.
Yeah, they could. Well, that sounds like that would be difficult if you had to like cycle through them. But
That'd be fun,
obviously
though.
they would just be on like different buttons that you would apply the different
Yeah,
coatings
yeah.
or whatever. That could be cool. But there could be also like some interesting reload mechanics, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. Machinist used to have a reload mechanic that was really fun. Well, I say really fun, and it was actually terrible, but it was just because of the way that it was designed. I think that it would be, you could do a reload mechanic in a really fun way, especially since crossbows like historic. Like I think if we get another fizz range, it's going to be a crossbow personally, and I think it would be really cool to have, like you said, like coatings that you cycle through, like different types of bolts that you could cycle through that had different effects. And there was some sort of like a magazine almost that had 5 or 6 bolts in it. And when you swapped, it reloaded, but there was another button that you could reload inside of your current thing to keep that going if you needed to for some reason. So I think that there's a lot of like fun ways that they could spin that.
Yeah, the way you worded that made me just instantly think of Picto with their motifs, just like prepping the paintings, like loading the mag like a similar way, and then like being able to spin them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would be really fun if you could load like a different order of arrows, and that would change like what your skills did. Almost like Mudras, you know, like different combinations of arrows would give you a different effect.
Maybe. Yeah, I have no idea. There's like a lot of ways you could go with that, but that's just what came to mind.
That would be fun.
That'd be interesting.
All right, man. Well, I think that we've been going for an hour and a half here.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty much all I had to talk about on that.
Yeah, there's a million things to say about it all, and we'll just see how it all shapes up moving forward, I guess. We're still
Yep.
at the start of the expansion, like nothing has happened
Yeah.
yet.
And we still got 2 more years of Dawn Trail, so there's still plenty of opportunity for them to make some cool things happen or to make some bad choices. You know?
Yeah, we'll
shall-
see.
We shall see.
Maybe not. It's a kind of just a neutral start here, I think, and it's just felt like it's kind of dragged on a little bit, but
Yeah, I'm really excited for 7.1.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, the 7.1 always has, or like the 0.1 patch always has some changes with jobs. And because we've had a whole cycle now, you know, a whole raid tier to sort of look at the jobs and see what works and what doesn't and what's performing and what isn't performing. And so I feel like at the beginning of every expansion, like the 0.0 and the 0.5 patch are almost like the beta, you know?
yeah.
And then like 0.1 is like the real patch start. Because, you know, we get some extra content. We're getting, you know, the 24-man, the Final Fantasy XI crossover raid,
Ultimate.
you know, whatever. Yeah, the ultimate.
That's going to bring all the problems to light.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that doesn't get fixed in the patch is going to get fixed real quick after the ultimate drops for sure.
Probably, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for it, and I'm hoping that the jobs keep moving forward in a good way, and that everybody gets to play something that they like.
Absolutely. I'm having fun so far. I got a lot of jobs to mess with at least, and that'll keep me busy for a while.
I agree. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
We will definitely have to do this again sometime,
For
and
sure.
maybe one for your channel.
Yep.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint. Possibly.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.
See ya.